which brings us to the backbench motion on freedom of religion in Pakistan. Jim Shannon to move the motion.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I first of all thank the Backbench Committee for agreeing to this and for granting time in the main chamber to speak upon it, and I thank all of the members who hopefully will make contributions as we go along. I beg to move that this House notes reports of the deteriorating religious freedom situation in Pakistan, expresses its concern over the alleged widespread forced conversions, human rights abuses of minority religious groups, deplores at the Pakistan government for not taking action, which it believes represents a serious violation of Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and further notes that the arrest of opposition of religious leaders by the local authorities has led to condemnation both in Pakistan and further afield. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to have, I believe, the first debate on religious persecution in this term of government, number one. I think it's the first time in about 4 or 5 years, I suspect, we've had a debate on this in the main chamber, so we've got the 2 in 1 today, so we're very grateful to the Backbench Committee for that opportunity and for doing that. I rise today with an urgent message about the plight of religious minorities in Pakistan. As chair of the all-party Parliamentary Group for Freedom of Religious Belief, and also as chair of the Pakistan Religious Minorities, I've had the privilege of hearing first-hand accounts of bravery, of resilience and heartbreak from those who continue to face unimaginable persecution for their faith. I've always had a deep interest, Madam Deputy Speaker, in Pakistan, even long before I come here, for my brothers and sisters who are Christians in a country where persecution is rife, where human rights abuse is rampant, and where the right to just express yourself in the way that you should be able to is denied them. I visited Pakistan on 2 occasions, back in 2018 and 2023. I'd love to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that things have changed in Pakistan in those intervening 5 years, but they haven't. Indeed, they got worse, and I'm going to explain some of those things as we move forward. Our APPG remains steadfast in its mission to uphold and defend the fundamental human rights to freedom of religion or belief for all people, regardless of faith or creed. And when I mention that there, as chair of the APPG for freedom of religious belief, speak up for those with Christian faith, those with other faith, and those with no faith. I believe in my heart that's my duty as a Christian to do that, but also as chair of the APPG. And I explain that when I deliberate on this of the many different religious groups that are persecuted. Today, I would urge my esteemed colleagues across this chamber to join us in amplifying the voices of the oppressed and taking decisive action to address the systematic injustices that they endure. The reality in Pakistan is, to put it in plain language, we all understand, is dire. It's critical. It's a crisis point. In fact, I can understand why some people feel utterly hopeless. Pakistan is a lovely nation, a nation with a rich and diverse history, but one that remains fraught with challenges for its religious minorities. For Christians, for Hindus, for Ahmadis, for Shia Muslims, face widespread discrimination, persecution and violence on a regular basis. The legislative and societal frameworks in Pakistan have created an environment where intolerance thrives. And if you let it get away once or twice or 3 times or 10 times, then it just continues to become a norm. And that's what's happening to those people in the religious minority section.
Would the member go away?
Very happy to, yes, of course.
We're familiar, even in our own country, with interventions from bodies like Amnesty International and the United Nations. Obviously, there's a far more acute need for their attention in somewhere like Pakistan. Does that seem, first of all, to be articulated adequately and driven home adequately? And does it have any effect even on such appalling matters as forced marriages and honour killings? Is any of that having an impact?
I thank my honourable friend and colleague for Northampton for bringing that forward. I would love to say that is it having an impact and that it is, but unfortunately I have to say I don't see much evidence of that. Everything that we ask for has to be, the response has to be evidentially based. So they are involved. Are Amnesty International are they present in Pakistan? Yes, they are. Are they highlighting these things in Pakistan? Well, only they can answer that. We probably don't see much evidence. The legislative and societal frameworks in Pakistan have created an environment where intolerance thrives. That's my concern. The blasphemy laws, which I'm going to ask for the Minister to directly respond to, they were introduced during General Sai Hulak's regime. They're among the harshest in the world and were frequently weaponised against religious minorities. I'm going to give some examples of that as we pursue this debate. Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Will the member agree with me that actually this goes beyond religious freedoms, but also extends to other equality matters such as women's rights, LGBT rights, that those go hand in hand, and this goes far broader than just religious freedoms?
My honourable friend, I'm going to mention that later on, so it's a very salient point, because whenever you have persecution for religious beliefs, you have human rights alongside it, and the two are married, they're not separate. If you take away human rights, then you're taking away the religious rights and so on, and the honourable gentleman is absolutely right to put that on record. Since the 1980s, many thousands, and I mean it, thousands of cases have been reported disproportionately affecting Christians, Hindus, Ahmadis. These laws are used not only to silence dissent, but also as tools for personal vendettas and mob incitement. When I was in Pakistan back in 2023, Madam Deputy Speaker, I remember meeting some of those who had been convicted, had been charged with blasphemy law, defaming or defaming the blasphemy laws, but were found that the allegations were vindictive and malicious, and there was no evidential base whatsoever for them. So I think I want to highlight that as well. These accusations, of course, have led to extrajudicial killings, violent attacks, mass displacements, and we cannot ignore, an honourable gentleman for Northampton referred to the plight of young Christian and Hindu girls who are abducted, forcibly converted to Islam and married to their captives. This is not merely a violation of their religious freedom, but an affront to their dignity and their human rights. In Sindh province alone, this practice has become alarmingly common, with inadequate legal protections allowing perpetrators to evade justice. Madam Deputy Speaker, there's something wrong with a society that can let a 14-year-old or a 12-year-old or someone who is still under the care of their parents to be taken away, abducted and married against their will to someone of such innocence. It really quite disturbs me, and unfortunately we have to report that's happening in Pakistan regularly. Dignity First report from 2024 highlighted over 70 violent incidents targeting Christians, ranging from mob violence to forced conversions and abductions. In the case of Jallianwala in Punjab, Christian homes and businesses were attacked and what appeared to be a premeditated assault on their religious identity. Why? Because they were Christians, attacked and brutalised for that reason. Tragically, the authorities have often failed to bring perpetrators to justice. Christians have also been subjected to accusations of blasphemy, which can result in torture or death at the hands of violent mobs. The international community must demand that Pakistan take concrete steps to end the violence against Christians and provide legal protection for all religious minorities. I believe, and this House believes, in freedom for religious minorities wherever they are in the world. Therefore, Pakistan, we ask them to conform to that protection for religious minorities as well. I commend the organisations, as an example, ADF International, which recently facilitated the rescue of Saima Bibi and Riya Salim, two brave young women forced into such marriages. Their release was a triumph, but countless others remain trapped in similar situations. Their cries for help go unanswered. And I think one of our requests will be to the Minister in place is to do something about that. I want, if I can, Madam Deputy Speaker, take up the plight of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Pakistan. We were very fortunate the last time we were there with them that we were able to meet some of the imams and some of the people who are in high levels of the Muslim faith. But those of an Ahmadiyya faith, according to society in Pakistan, the Ahmadiyyas are a sect of Muslimism, but they're not the one that conforms to everyone else. Therefore, according to Pakistan law, they're heretics, if that's the right word to use, and they're outside of the mainstream. There's something wrong when it comes to religious liberty if you can't accept that people have their own right to choose the God that they wish to worship, and that should be protected. Declared non-Muslims by the state in 1974, Ahmadis face systematic discrimination, enshrined in law, no freedom there. Under Ordinance 20, the religious practice such as calling their places of worship mosques or referring to their faith as Islam are criminalised due to the religious belief that they held. Desecration of Ahmadi mosques and graves have become almost routine. We were there the last time we were there. The pictures of their churches and their mosques destroyed, of their gravestones destroyed, and their graves desecrated. Since 2021, over 40 mosques and 421 graves have been destroyed or defaced. Violent hate speech against Ahmadis is openly promoted, with preachers inciting mobs to commit acts of violence. It's not just a matter of verbally objecting, and that perhaps they take it further. Mob violence ensues, and many people are hurt as a follow-on. The September of 2024 commemoration of just 2.5 months ago, commemoration of anti-Ahmadi laws was particularly chilling, as it emboldened extremists and led to further attacks on this very vulnerable community. In Parliamentary, Curran district, Shia Muslims, again another sect, faced relentless attacks from extremist groups, including the Taliban and the ISIS-affiliated organisations. And just this year, Parliamentary was cut off from the rest of Pakistan due to a blockade, resulting in severe shortages of medical supplies, food and fuel. 11 lives were lost because critically ill patients could not access essential care. To pivot slightly, I also believe that there is an obligation to address the role of the Jamaat-e-Islami group in Pakistan. Not only do they play a significant role in the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War, but it continues to shape the religious and political landscapes across that region. It's got a student wing as well. The student wing is called Islami Theatre Shiber. The organisation has been involved in violent protests, including recent clashes in Bangladesh over government policies. Founded by Sayyid Abdul Al-Madidi, Jamaat-e-Islami promotes the idea of establishing an Islamic State and has been linked to extremist activities through connections with groups like Hamish and the Muslim Brotherhood. The legacy of Jamaat-e-Islami's involvement in atrocities during the liberation of Bangladesh still casts a shadow over its actions today, both in Pakistan and in Bangladesh. And we want to see peace and stability and the democratic process in working well, but there are those who work against it. In addition to the suffering of religious minorities in Pakistan, we cannot ignore the ongoing targeted violence against Shia Muslims in regions such as Parachina. Located in Pakistan's volatile tribal belt, it has been the site of relentless sectarian violence, including a recent attack that left 44 Shia Muslims dead at the hands of extremist Sunni militias and the Taliban. These acts of violence are not isolated, but rather part of a broader pattern of persecution against the Shia community. In August 2024, a conflict over land disputes escalated into deadly sectarian violence, leaving 46 people dead and 200 injured. Such violence is not isolated, but part of a broader pattern of targeted attacks on Shia Muslims, perpetuating cycles of hatred and division. The situation is urgent. These attacks are not only an affront to basic human rights, but also to the principles of religious tolerance and coexistence. Just to give an example, Madam Deputy Speaker, whenever I was in Pakistan, I remember we went to the Church of Pakistan, at the equivalent to the Church of England, and the Honourable Lady for St Helens isn't here, but she went to the Roman Catholic cathedral as well. When we went to both of those places, they were surrounded by guards inside and outside. There was metal gates on the entrance and we had a police guard along with the army as well, and all the time we were there. The point I'm making is, to be a Christian or to be have a different religious persuasion, it has to lend itself to extra security in that area. And I was thinking, I always remember when I left, some of the parishioners left the Church of Pakistan church to make their way home, and they walked out through the gates. There's nobody guarding them, while there was people who were obviously guarding us, and that makes me very, very conscious of that. I'm very happy.
Remember,
yeah.
thank the member for giving way and pay tribute not just to the debate he secured, but his continuing efforts in this regard. Just when he's outlining the litany of attacks that hopefully will be deplored by all, would he join with me in commending groups like the Open Doors group, who in January again will have their annual watch list, which itemises in very good detail the types of attacks and criticisms and human rights violations that exist across the globe, particularly those who are persecuted for their religious belief.
Can I thank my honourable friend and colleague for East London Derry for doing that? And he's very, very right to put it on record. The issue of that, I think Pakistan will feature highly, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the top 20 of countries where persecution is rife. It's one of those leagues that you don't want to be the top of. It's not like one in the Premier League football. This one, you don't want to be number one, or you don't want to be anywhere in the top 20 in the world as it is. Pakistan's legal framework ostensibly guarantees religious freedom under its constitution, yet the reality is far, far different. The single national curriculum, and just in 2021, has been criticised for marginalised religious minorities. Textbooks continue to perpetuate stereotypes, fostering intolerance amongst the next generation. And we have to be very careful what we do and what Pakistan does in relation to education. We had hoped that on our visit there some time ago, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we would see some of the changes, that we see the opportunities coming to when it says Pakistan says it sets so many jobs aside for religious minority groups. The fact is we don't see that. There are many people who have talents, who are Christians, who are Hindus, who are Shia Muslims, who are Ahmadiyas, or Baha'i, who have a faith that doesn't conform to Pakistan's state faith. And as such, but they could do the same jobs every bit as well. Minority students are forced to study Islamic content, isolating them further in a society already fraught with prejudice. Economic discrimination compounds these challenges. Non-Muslims are often relegated to low-status jobs with limited opportunities for social or professional mobility. This systematic marginalisation keeps them in a cycle of poverty and vulnerability. I'll give you another example of that if I can, Madam Deputy Speaker. Those people, mostly Christians, by the way, who work in the brick kilns. We did a report through the Pakistan religious minorities in the last term of government, presented it to the Pakistan government, but we don't see any action or response to that just yet. My brothers and sisters, Christians, they're persecuted, they're beaten, they're abused in every way that is possible to imagine, or you don't want to imagine it. Their contracts of employment are changed in such a way that they're not just in contract to the brick kilns for, say, a couple of years or 10 years perhaps. They're there forever. So that report, I believe, highlighted that as well. Honourable members, the United Kingdom has a proud history of championing human rights on the global stage. As we deepen our relationship with Pakistan, we must use all of our influence to advocate for meaningful change. So I urge my colleagues to join me in calling on the Minister, and pleased to see the Minister in his place. The Shannon Minister, newly elected in his place, I wish him well, and we do look forward to a consensus of opinion across the Chamber in this issue. I want to give a couple of asks, so it's more than a couple, it's always more than a couple with me probably, but that's by the way. But I do it respectively and in a positive fashion. Can we advocate for blasphemy law reform by working with international allies to pressure Pakistan to reform its blasphemy laws, ensuring that they cannot be misused against religious minorities? Secondly, to support victims of forced conversion and marriage by providing resources to NGOs working on the ground to rescue and rehabilitate victims. Press the Pakistan government to implement stronger legal safeguards to protect vulnerable girls and women. And another gentleman in his intervention referred to the importance of how women and girls are looked upon as second class in many cases. If you're a Christian, you're doubly second class in that country. Thirdly, to demand for equal rights for the Ahmadi people by advocating for the repeal of discriminatory laws targeting the Ahmadiyya community and ensure that they are granted full rights as citizens of Pakistan. Fourthly, to provide humanitarian aid to Parliamentary urge the Pakistan government to lift the blockade, restore essential service, and to mediate sectarian conflicts to prevent further bloodshed. There is a role for our government to do in this country if we were to intermediate, but in Pakistan it's more important, but it doesn't seem to happen. And fifthly, to promote educational reform by collaborating with the Pakistan authorities to develop curricula that promote inclusivity and tolerance and foster a culture of coexistence. And finally, in the request, Minister, I know there's a private members' bill tomorrow. It won't be taken tomorrow because the focus will be on the major bill of assisted dying. And I've asked for the Special Envoy for Freedom of Religious Belief to strengthen accountability and set a precedent on the international stage that we warrant for turning on human rights or anybody's freedom of religious or belief. I know that the bill will be put off tomorrow because that's the system of what happened, Madam Deputy Speaker, probably until March. I know I've asked for meetings with the Prime Minister and also with the Foreign Secretary. I'm hopeful those meetings will take place. If it hadn't been for the wash-up on the sudden calling of the election, I suspect that this would probably have been law. I know that the questions I've asked in the Chamber in relation to that have come back positively, and we're hopeful of that will be the case. But again, maybe the Minister might be able to give me some way forward now. And I just want to cast back 1 minute, if I can, to the time we were there in 2018 in relation to the blasphemy law. Most people here will know the case of Easy Baby. She was accused of blasphemy. It was a vexatious, malicious, vindictive, untrue allegation, but nonetheless she was subject to the law that pervades in Pakistan. She fought her case and she was then sentenced. When we were in Pakistan that first time round, we met 2 of the 3 judges who would make that decision. I'm not saying that we did any better than anybody else, Madam Deputy Speaker, that's not why I'm saying it. But we used our persuasion of why and how the blasphemy law is used in that method against people who are of a different faith. I remember coming home and the minister at that time was Alan Field, I think it was the minister. Can't remember exactly, but I think that's who it was. He said, "Jim, don't be saying anything about Easy Baby," because the 2 judges that we met told us that they were of a mind to set her free. So, but we understood the process. Don't say too much about it. Bring it home and let the process run, and it did, and she was freed, and she now lives in Canada. But there are so many other Easy Babies that live in Pakistan who deserve to have protection as well. So it must be clear that we stand on the side of the people of Pakistan, and that hate and intolerance divided and hurts people of the people. It's within our power to support stability and freedom through our influence and being resolute in our commitment to the region. Being idle is something that we cannot make. I quote a former Prime Minister of this chamber long before I came here, and her words were, "The lady's not for turning." So we all know who that is. I suggest that we use that same spirit and must not step back to our commitments. The challenges facing religious minorities in Pakistan are immense, but they're not insurmountable. We have the tools, we have the influence and the moral responsibility to act. By joining forces with international partners, civil society organisations and the Pakistani diaspora, we can help create a Pakistan where no one is persecuted for their faith. That would be the objective of this debate today, Madam Deputy Speaker. It would be the goal that I would hope that we might be able to achieve. So let us not be silent witnesses to these atrocities. Let us stand together and be a voice for the voiceless, a shield for the defenceless, and a beacon of hope for those who have known only darkness. I always finish, Madam Deputy Speaker, these debates with a scripture text, and the one is Proverbs 31. It's verses 8 and 9. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and defend the rights of the poor and needy. Let's do that today. Thank you.
Yeah.
The question is, as on the order paper, John McDonnell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Strangford for securing the debate by the Backbench Committee, and thank the Backbench Committee for that. Can I also say congratulate him on this upgrade from Westminster Hall to the main chamber. There are some who are arguing for a renaming of Westminster Hall to the Shannon Debating Forum overall. I want to take up the point that he's made, and I think others will want to make as well, on behalf of the Armadi community. Like many others in the chamber, I have an Armadi community within my constituency. They operate under the slogan of love for all, hate for none, in that campaign. And we saw it on our London buses at one point a few years ago. And what they relate to me is exactly as the Honourable Gentleman said, is the distressing tales of what's happening to their community in Pakistan. As he says, just to describe yourself as a Muslim, being a member of the Ahmadi community, is actually an offence under the penal law in Pakistan. You can be, I think it's a 3-year term of imprisonment or a fine, and even death if you just describe yourself as a Muslim, if you're Ahmadiyya. In addition to that, if you call your place of worship a mosque, or the prayer call, Adhan, goes out, you can be prosecuted under that penal code, which is appalling. And the briefing that many of us had from the members of the all-party group in this recent period is the situation this year has got significantly worse. We were in the briefing, we were told of at least 4 people that had been murdered because of their religion. We also had a list of a number of people who've been arrested and in prison for their religion. And within prison, the situation for them is extremely precarious. There's worries about torture as well. And the fact that publications are banned, that to be able to vote, if you're an Ahmadiyya, you're placed upon a separate list, and in fact many of them are disenfranchised as a result. And in past debates in this chamber and in Westminster Hall, when we've raised this, our government, on all political complexions, have made representations. At times there's been some alleviation because of the world focus of attention onto Pakistan's behaviour. But as I say, in this recent period, the reports that we're getting back are things are getting worse, and they're getting dramatically worse. And that's why we do need some action from our government. And I agree with the Honourable Gentleman, working through international agencies as well, to shine a light on what's happening at the moment, but then to make some representations as well. I think it's key now that we mobilise the pressure as much as we possibly can to see whether or not we can influence the Pakistani government to scrap the blasphemy laws that are being used against the Ahmadiyya community and others so ferociously. But can I say something as well that might prove to be contentious with some? I actually think we now need to think about going beyond that. There are individuals in Pakistan within the administration and within the security forces who we can now identify as leading on some of these human rights abuses. And I wonder if we should treat them as human rights abusers like we would others from other countries. And that means looking at forms of sanctions upon them, naming and shaming, of course, but also instigating some forms of sanctions, because most of those individuals do have a relationship with this country in some form or another. In fact, many of them will be using their resources via the investment vehicles within this country itself. And I feel we just need to take a stronger view and stronger action from the ones that we've taken in the past, because the situation has deteriorated. The other issue as well, and we've raised this before, we do provide a fair amount of aid and assistance to Pakistan, which is fine. I can completely understand that. But one, I think it's important that we look at the aid that we do provide to Pakistan so that it's not abused. For example, the Pakistani government nationalised the Ahmadiyyas' schools and have never returned them back to that community itself. And we do fund education within Pakistan. I think we need to be conditional about how we fund the investment in education itself. And the second thing as well, and this might be provocative as well, I think what we need to be doing is look at the funding of those organisations that are campaigning for human rights within Pakistan and also internationally, so we can strengthen their arm in what they're doing in advocating on behalf of the Ahmadiyya community. That's my position with regard to Ahmadiyya. I want to slightly abuse the title of the debate, if I can, Madam Deputy Speaker, because Human rights abuses in Pakistan have worsened in this recent period, not just for the Ahmadis but for the others. In terms of Balochistan at the moment, there is severe repression taking place, and there is a history in these recent months, but this last year in particular, of repression that's taken place under Baloch. And what we're finding is the Pakistani authorities have introduced a strategy of disappearances. And we've had large numbers of people who have just simply disappeared. And there's another crudity about it as well. It's about find and dump. And what we're finding is from those disappearances, the only way these people are found is when their bodies are dumped on the streets within that region. There are issues that are taking place within Balochistan, which I think forms of repression that are taking place are producing a resistance movement. Unfortunately, some of that is an armed resistance movement, and we've seen what being classified as terrorist actions as well. And so therefore there's a deterioration. But there is a peace movement, and the peace movement that's taking place is largely led by women, and they've been instigating marches over this last 12 months. But unfortunately what we're finding now is that those women are being arrested, and the peace movement and human rights movement in Balochistan is now being savagely repressed. And again, if we are taking up these issues of religious freedom, I think we should also be extending that to the whole range of human rights abuses that are taking place in Pakistan. Because again, what I wouldn't want to see is a destabilisation of the country as a result of a reactionary government taking these measures. Because I think people, from my understanding, are on an edge. They've had enough. And unfortunately, there's no forms of response that we've seen from the Pakistan government that they will reconsider the strategy that they're pursuing by way of repressive measures.
Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Honourable Member for Strangford for securing this debate and his excellent speech and that of others. Pakistan's constitution enshrines the right of every citizen to profess, practice and propagate his religion. Whilst in January, the Minister of Foreign Affairs went as far as to claim Pakistan has undertaken wide-ranging measures to promote religious freedom and protect minority rights. That is sadly and simply untrue. In the face of forced conversions and mob violence, the Pakistani government is far too often failing to fulfil its basic duty of protecting its citizens. Even more seriously, there's widespread evidence of the state actively supporting the discrimination of certain religious minorities, including Shia Muslims, Christians and Hindus, with laws against blasphemy in particular being used to undermine their human rights and freedoms. However, today I want to focus on the Ahmadi Muslim community, who are subject to some of the most serious discrimination. I'm proud many in the Ahmadi Muslim community live and or worship in my constituency, which is home to Morden's magnificent Battle Fatu Mosque, the largest mosque in the UK and the worldwide headquarters of the faith. It is from here that the Caliph's regular Friday sermon is televised live throughout the world. But whilst Ahmadi Muslims can practice in freedom in this country, that is sadly not the case for those watching and listening to him in Pakistan. I've heard from many from the mosque and my constituents about the persecution their community faces on a daily basis in Pakistan, in their mosques, in their homes and in their businesses. Ahmadi Muslims are facing persecution merely for observing their faith.
Will the honourable member give way on that point?
Of course.
Thank you. In Epsom Newell, I've also similarly got a number of Ahmadiyya Muslims, and it was really shameful to understand that this faith group had to move their home to the UK to avoid this exact persecution. Does the honourable member agree with me that all religious groups should have the freedom to practice their faith in Pakistan, and that we here should in this House be a voice for the persecuted?
Yeah. I completely agree, and we have an absolute duty to enforce that and make sure that happens. The Pakistan government is doing more than just turning a blind eye to this discrimination, with the state actively seeking to marginalise the Ahmadi Muslim community. Unless Ahmadi Muslims declare themselves to be non-Muslim, they are not permitted to stand for office or vote, denied a voice in the system that is meant to uphold their rights. It is important to note this was not always the case. For example, the first Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Sir Chowdhury Zafarullah Khan, was an Ahmadi Muslim. Sadly, however, Ahmadi Muslim freedoms over time have been undermined by the Pakistani government. But it does not mean these rights cannot be restored. That is why our government should be speaking more loudly on this issue. The UK is Pakistan's third largest trading partner and their largest in Europe. We are consequently not without influence. Disenfranchised and marginalised Pakistani and Ahmadi Muslims have very few options at their disposal. It is therefore our duty to raise our voices, for the government to do so, do what it can to help protect their and other religious minorities' rights. I consequently echo my party leader's calls last year to reconsider Pakistan's trade preferences. I also hope the government will work with Ahmadi Muslim refugees across the world and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to preserve their safety. As Gladstone said in 1877, non-conformity supplies the backbone of English liberalism, and the government must do what it can to continue this country's proud liberal tradition, protecting the rights of the Ahmadi Muslims and the religious minorities in Pakistan. Thank you.
Alex Ballinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the member for Strangford for organising this important debate. I can see from the many examples you've given in your long time fighting for religious freedom in Pakistan and for Christians around the world that this is something you care deeply about, and it's important that we're discussing it here today. Like the Minister, I spent some time working in Pakistan with the FCDO and spent 3 years between 2019 and 2021 working in Islamabad and Lahore. I spent a lot of that time travelling around the Punjab when I had responsibility for that province within the FCDO's area. And a lot of the examples that the member for Strangford gave ring really familiar. So I'll talk about some of those in a moment. But before I do that, I wanted to highlight some of the other parts of Pakistan that I saw there, and some of the more positives and maybe some of the examples that can be given when we're talking to Pakistan in the future about how religious minorities should be treated. So in my time travelling throughout Punjab, I got to see many religious sites, in fact. So travelling through the old city of Lahore is the very impressive Badshahi Masjid. You can travel down to Darawa in Bahawalpur and see a fantastic fort there. There is the Rukn-e Alam shrine in Multan, as well as the Gurdwara in Nankana Sahib. And of course, the Lahore Cathedral that we saw there as well. And I mention all of these sites not because I want to give people a tour of Pakistan or indeed to promote its tourism, but that is... Why not? but that is definitely something that should be encouraged. But to mention that each of these magnificent buildings are from different religions, that Pakistan has a proud history of various minorities throughout the ages, from Buddhists in the Gandwara civilization to Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims of various sects, as well as Ahmadis and Christians. And there is that history there, and there are part of the country that do recognise that. And spending time with each of these groups was a real privilege for me. But of course, this is a debate on freedom of religion and belief, and while there are huge concerns in Pakistan with the treatment of minorities, I wanted to give one positive example of something that's happened in recent years. And that was, towards the end of my time, the opportunity I had to visit the Kartarpur corridor, which is on the border between Pakistan and India. This is a site built on the location that was used by Guru Nanak when he first established the Sikh community in the 16th century. And it was a long time divided between India and Pakistan, but in 2019, Narendra Modi and Imran Khan allowed access for the community to cross between the two countries. And the time that I visited in 2020, I met pilgrims from India that had come to Pakistan that were meeting relatives in the Sikh community that they hadn't seen since partition, nearly 80 years ago. And the joy on the faces of those people that was enabled by the Pakistani government and the promises that they made showed that with some religious minorities, it is possible for the government to be more positive. But of course, in the 3 years that I was based in Punjab, there were numerous cases of brutal attacks on religious minorities, some of which the member for Strangford has mentioned. I'll give 3 more examples in the time that I was there. So in April 2021, a mob attack on Mariam Lal and Nusha Rouge in Faisalabad, 2 Christian nurses that had been asked to clean up the lockers in the hospital they were working in, but were set upon by a mob with accusations of blasphemy. And they were later arrested by the police and held in prison for some time. They've now been released, fortunately. In December 2021, the lynching of Priyantha Kamara in Sialkot. Priyantha was a Buddhist from Sri Lanka who was running a factory, and the general manager there. He was lynched by an angry mob around accusations of blasphemy, while the police stood by and were unable to intervene. And in August 2022, the stabbing of Nasir Ahmed, a 62-year-old Ahmadi grandfather that refused to chant slogans in support of TLP. And for that crime, he was murdered in the street by an angry Pakistani man. And I raise these 3 incidents not because they're extraordinary, but because they felt routine. So when I was there on a weekly basis, I would hear about examples from the Christian community, from the Ahmadi community, and from others about brutal violence that they were subjected to and humiliations. So Sumaira Shafiq, a friend of mine who works for the Christian Lawyers Association of Pakistan, she would call me on a regular basis, updating on the forced conversions that she was working upon, particularly in the south of Punjab. And many people from the Ahmadiyya community, who would obviously prefer to be anonymous at the moment, they regularly raised with me the victimisation they were facing. The mosques being destroyed, the schools being closed down, and you heard from the other members, schools being nationalised by the government, and even the introduction of a new marriage law. So if you are an Ahmadiyya Muslim in Pakistan, you must renounce your faith in order to get married. The level of discrimination is quite outrageous. I'm lucky to have a significant Ahmadiyya community in my own constituency. So Beit al-Ghafur Mosque on Long Lane Road in Halesowen, they hold a number of interfaith events. I've been to many of them. I've been pleased to see the welcome that they provide to many members from different religious backgrounds. And the contrast is striking with the way that the Ahmadiyya community is treated in Pakistan. When I was in Lahore, I had many discussions with the human rights ministers of Punjab. Tilil Sandhu and Ramesh Singh, I still count them as friends. I know they have a very difficult situation, very challenging to work within the system to improve the conditions of religious minorities. And that many people in Pakistan, many parts of the government are trying to do that. But I would, of course, encourage them to do more. So finally, I would like to thank the member for Strangford for organising this debate on a subject I think we should be talking about more. I know it's an extremely difficult subject for the FCDO to work with, and I understand the limitations that we're working in. But I would ask the Minister to continue to raise this with our counterparts in Pakistan and the deterioration in recent years that religious minorities have faced. And I would ask him to commit to include freedom of religion and belief in discussions around future cooperation and trade agreements that we are having with Pakistan, to use every opportunity across government to hold these discussions to push that forward. Thank you.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Luke Taylor.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Strangford for bringing this debate and allowing us to discuss this incredibly important issue in this House. On the 25th of November 1981, the General Assembly of the United Nations passed Resolution 3655. It said, "Discrimination between human beings on the grounds of religion or belief constitutes an affront to human dignity and a disavowal of the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, and shall be condemned as a violation of the human rights and fundamental freedoms proclaimed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights." Nearly half a century has passed since those words were written, and they came just 7 years after the passage of the Second Amendment to the Constitution of Pakistan. That declared that Ahmadi Muslims were not a Muslim for the purposes of the Constitution or the law. Now, I will concentrate in my speech on the Ahmadi community, but that should not diminish the persecution and the discrimination suffered by other communities, which have been mentioned by many in this chamber. We find ourselves today, so many decades since, still grappling with the critical injustice, prejudice and persecution that the amendment enshrined in law and enabled. That is what the current legal framework in Pakistan has done. It has enabled not just legal exclusion and prosecution, but ongoing hate speech and violent persecution. Extremist clerics in Pakistan have called on Ahmadi Muslims to be hung or beheaded, for their women to be murdered to prevent more Ahmadi Muslims from being born, and even for the government of Pakistan to understand that if they do not act, the people will take matters into their own hands and kill Ahmadi Muslims themselves. And if anyone is in any lingering doubt whether this awful rhetoric extends just to calls for violence within Pakistan's borders, I refer them to the comments at one rally this year, where the following was said: "We have to strangle each and every Ahmadi. You have no idea how powerful this slogan is. You will raise it here, and Ahmadi will die in Great Britain." This abhorrent rhetoric, and it has no place in a democratic republic like Pakistan. And I know from conversations with many of my constituents, as well as Ahmadi Muslims across London, that it absolutely terrifies Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan and here in the UK. Because rhetoric, as we too often forget, has consequences. Violent rhetoric becomes violent as surely night becomes day. And sure enough, violent hate crimes across Pakistan and around the world against Ahmadi Muslims are at shocking levels. This year, 4 Ahmadi Muslims were killed in a targeted manner. Tahir Iqbal, the president of a local Ahmadi Muslim community, was shot dead by 2 motorcyclists. Zaka Oreman, a dentist, was killed in his own clinic by 2 gunmen. In both cases, no perpetrators have been identified and brought to justice. And in Sadulpur, 2 Ahmadi Muslims, Ghulam Sawat and Rahat Ahmad Bajwa, were murdered in separate incidents on the same day. The alleged perpetrator, a 16-year-old student of a madrasa, confessed to the killings, citing religious reasons. 16 years old. I invite honourable members to recall the poisonous rhetoric that I've just outlined as why this young man must have been exposed to in order to carry out such a heinous act. It seems that violence against Ahmadi Muslims is rarely investigated and in many cases is seemingly encouraged or enabled by local officials and policemen in Pakistan. In June, 30 Ahmadi Muslims were arrested for the crime of celebrating Eid. Ahmadi homes were attacked, an Ahmadi mosque was ransacked, and the police stood by and did nothing. In fact, earlier this year in January, it is alleged that local police in the Punjab region, acting under instructions from a local official, themselves took part in another disconcertingly common and awful act of hatred: the desecration of tombs in an Ahmadi Muslim graveyard. Desecration is a particularly cowardly and heinous act and serves only to underscore the severity of the situation facing Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan. Freedom of worship is inextricably linked with freedom of expression and speech, and as a Liberal, I will always place the greatest currency on that most cherished of virtues. But as all liberal societies have found, freedom of speech cannot extend to freedom of hate speech and the freedom to incite violence and hatred. The Pakistani government ought to be reminded of that fact in our bilateral engagements. Madam Deputy Speaker, nobody should have to live like this, to face hatred and threats, violence and death, just for worshipping your own religion in a peaceful manner in a democratic country. It goes against every principle we hold dear in the community of international law. It goes against our every principle as an open, democratic, tolerant nation ourselves, not least as a nation that is bound to Pakistan by a common history, a common language, and a track record of collaboration on tackling extremism in the region. We must be a critical partner of Pakistan, and I call on the government to respond to the concerns raised in the House today. Please come forward with reassurances that at every single opportunity, the plight of Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan will be raised with the government of that country, because our conscience calls on us to not turn a blind eye. Ahmadi Muslims deserve, as members of all faiths do, to worship free of intimidation and discrimination. The Liberal Democrats have long been in favour of a rigorous, values-based foreign policy that puts our money where our mouth is. We cannot just talk a good game on protecting minorities around the world and standing up for those fundamental freedoms outlined in the Declaration of Human Rights. We must use our leverage with governments like the one in Pakistan to encourage them to take serious and concrete steps towards making them a reality. It should be an issue that unites us across this House, and I'm encouraged to hear that it does, and one that reminds us not just of our obligations under international law, but our moral duty to those facing oppression everywhere. Thank you.
Shadow Minister Andrew Rosindell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I start by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Strangford, for securing this vitally important debate here in the Chamber this afternoon, and for continuing the noble work of his predecessor, our former colleague Fiona Bruce, as chairman of the all-party Parliamentary Group for Freedom of Religion and Belief. I would also like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting this debate this afternoon, and it is indeed a privilege to respond on behalf of His Majesty's most loyal opposition. Madam Deputy Speaker, Pakistan is a Commonwealth partner, and our paths have been intertwined for an important part of our shared history. The UK and Pakistan have a close and long-standing relationship, underpinned by very strong links between our peoples, especially through the Commonwealth of Nations. And I'm intrigued and very pleased, to be honest, to hear the passion of some of the members this afternoon that have spoken, of all sides, to follow the member for Sutton and Cheam, who spoke passionately about the persecution of the Ahmadi people. We rarely agree on things, but the right honourable member for Hayes and Harlington, I have to say, spoke passionately as well about his own community, and he quoted from what the Ahmadi community say: love for all, hate for none. Is there a single member of this House that could ever disagree with that? And of course, the member for Wimbledon, who represents a large community with the mosque, which I believe is in Morden, but I now think is part of his constituency. I know the mosque he's referring to, and I've learned a lot about the Ahmadi community this afternoon, and it is really deeply distressing to hear of some of the incidents that have occurred, and not least the member for Halesowen, who spoke from experience, having represented Her Majesty's government perhaps in Islamabad as a diplomat. I in fact went to Pakistan as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee some years ago, and I thank him for his service, but relaying the experience and the examples of some of the horrendous persecution that have taken place. So I think we are united, Madam Deputy Speaker, in this House in standing up for freedom of religion and wanting to see a change to what is clearly completely wrong taking place, some of the incidents and some of the persecutions we've been hearing about today in Pakistan. Madam Deputy Speaker, the 1956 Constitution of Pakistan included liberties to profess religion freely. However, today, freedom of self-expression is subject to Article 19 of the Constitution. And according to the Open Doors World Watch list this year, Pakistan is the 7th most unsafe nation in the world to reside in as a Christian. Churches have endured regular attacks, and those with strong community outreach have faced severe rights violations. There is also concern about the career prospects of Christians being more limited than others. The Minister, I know, will be aware that the previous government established the Coalition for Religious Equality and Inclusive Development, a British government-funded multi-country programme which has implemented a project in Pakistan to protect minorities who work as sewage and sanitation workers. Can this House have the Minister's assurance when he speaks later that the work of that organisation will continue under the new government? And since the 1980s, Madam Deputy Speaker, Pakistan's blasphemy laws have become more and more severe and oppressive. Ahmadis have been subject to blasphemy laws which carry the punishment of 3 years imprisonment and severe fines, most notable of which is Ordinance 20, which prohibits Ahmadis from publicly practising their Islamic faith and forbids them from using sacred texts for praying purposes. That simply cannot be right. Ahmadis have been denied identity cards and are coerced to sign faith-related documents. I know that the ministers in previous governments have raised this issue of the Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan and with Pakistan's Foreign Minister and High Commissioner. And given we have several cases of brutal extrajudicial killings of Ahmadi Muslims in recent months, some being high-profile members of their community, I hope that we will receive the Minister's reassurance today that this will indeed remain the case and that ministers will be continuing to press our counterparts in Islamabad and indeed the High Commissioner here in London about the issues that have been raised in today's debate. Despite making up only 2% of the Pakistani population, Christians are subject to roughly a quarter of all accusations of blasphemy. Anyone openly calling for reform of blasphemy laws are openly threatened by radicals. According to AP News, on the 5th of September 2023, in August last year, at least 17 churches were set on fire in Jamwala, hundreds of houses attacked, and hundreds of Christians fled from their homes, subsequent to inaccurate accusations of blasphemy. I was pleased that the Foreign Secretary at that time raised these attacks against Christians in Jamwala with Pakistan's Prime Minister in September of last year. Additionally, in August, Lord Ahmed, the then Foreign Office Minister, wrote to Pakistan's caretaker Foreign Minister urging the government to ensure the safety of the Christian community following these atrocious attacks. These reprisals are not restricted to Christians and Ahmadi Muslims. Unfortunately, Hindus too have been subjected to increased violence. In July of 2023, a Hindu temple in the Sindhu province of Pakistan was attacked, and in June 2022, a Hindu temple in Karachi was also destroyed. Madam Deputy Speaker, according to the National Council of Churches in Pakistan, not just since the adoption of the 1973 Constitution, nor since the turn of this century, but annually as many as 1,000 Christians and Hindu girls are kidnapped. There are also reports of Christian children being obligated to attend Islamic lessons at their local madrasas, while Christian teaching is restricted to the home. I hope the government are once again raising these concerns with our counterparts in the Pakistani government. And Article 4 of the Commonwealth Charter, the Minister, I'm sure, will know, states the need to promote religious freedom. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, whether it's women who have been snatched from their homes and forced to profess a religion which they do not follow, or men who are targeted through blasphemy charges, there are clearly issues that need to be addressed most urgently. Religion has, of course, provided a bedrock for the Pakistani people and serves as a source of motivation and betterment of society, and all, I believe, must be free to pursue their beliefs without fear. While I have the opportunity, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to commend the work of my friend and the friend to many of us in this House, Fiona Bruce, who I mentioned earlier, the former member for Congleton, who dedicated many years of her time in this place, fighting for freedom of religion and of belief and against persecution of minorities that wish to worship freely. And one of the towering achievements, I believe, of the last government was to appoint the United Kingdom's first ever special envoy for freedom of religion and belief. And so, can I also ask the Minister to assure the House that His Majesty's government will indeed be doing the same, and that an appointment to this position will be announced very soon. 2 years ago, the Conservative government brought together 800 faith and belief leaders, human rights activists and 100 government delegations for the International Ministerial Conference on Freedom of Religion and Belief to agree a plan to encourage and defend those fundamental inalienable rights. The outcome of this conference bore witness to the pledges of 47 governments, international organisations and other entities to take action in support of freedom of religion or belief. Through soft power of our diplomatic network, the previous government was able to solidify coalitions of support to protect freedom of religion or belief for all within international bodies and through a multilateral framework, hardening obligations for states to uphold their human rights obligations. And so I sincerely hope that once again the government will continue the work of the last government in the previous Parliament. Madam Deputy Speaker, on a separate note, earlier this year the Conservative government put on record its serious concerns about the fairness and lack of inclusivity of Pakistan's recent election. We were clear we regretted that not all parties were allowed to contest the elections and that legal processes were used to prevent some political leaders from participation and to prevent the use of recognisable party symbols. As I'm sure the House is also aware, restrictions were imposed on internet access on polling day, and there were significant delays to the reporting of results and claims of irregularities on the counting process. I believe that the new Labour government needs to urge the authorities in Pakistan to uphold fundamental human rights. Those I've already touched on and many other members have today, as well as other important freedoms, including free access to information. The rule of law must be unflinchingly upheld. And to be crystal clear, that includes the right to a fair trial. For the avoidance of doubt, that means adherence to due process within an independent, transparent judicial system, free from interference. To this end, I would ask the Minister what discussion has the new government had with the government of Pakistan on those issues? And what is Labour's position on the imprisonment and general treatment of former Prime Minister Imran Khan, which, as he will know, has caused huge divisions within the Pakistani community? So to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe the United Kingdom has been at the vanguard defending freedom of religion and belief and civil liberties and human rights. And so we urge His Majesty's government to continue with this important work in protecting all those who choose to practice their faith, who have the right and must continue to have the right to do so without fear and in freedom. As the Honourable Member for Strangford said earlier, there must be no turning back in our defence of freedom, of liberties, on the rule of law and on the right of peoples throughout our world to share a religion and to practice a religion without fear, and I hope His Majesty's government will follow that tradition.
Minister Hamish Falconer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for Strangford for securing this important debate. I'd like to pay tribute to his work as the co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Freedom of Religious Belief. I know he's been engaged on these issues for some time. I note the group visited Pakistan last year and published important recommendations on improving the state of freedom of religion. Their commitment to defending the rights of vulnerable communities across the globe does not go unnoticed. I'm grateful too for the contributions of other honourable members, and I'd like to join the Shadow Minister in paying tribute to the service of my honourable friend, the member for Halesowen in Pakistan. I'll respond to the points raised and highlight what the UK is doing to help protect the rights of minorities in Pakistan, but I'd like to reassure the House that I was in Pakistan last week. I was the first Minister of the British Government to visit in some years, Madam Deputy Speaker, more than 2, I believe. And as I understand it, I'm the only G7 Minister to have visited Pakistan this year. As this House knows, and has been clear from this afternoon's debate, Pakistan is an important country, a strategic country, and it is important that we stay engaged in the full range of issues going on in that country. On that note, Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope you will allow me just to provide some brief comments on current events in Pakistan. I am deeply concerned by the reports of loss of life arising from this week's protests in Islamabad, which I know have been followed very closely in this House. The British government supports individuals' rights to protest. We urge the Pakistani authorities to respect these fundamental freedoms. We are closely monitoring the situation, including the potential impact on British nationals. We are concerned by reports that a number of journalists have gone missing following these protests, including Matullah Jan, a respected Pakistani journalist and achieving scholar. The UK remains committed to media freedom and the protection of journalists. We will urge the authorities to ensure the safe return of all journalists. I also want to express my sincere condolences, Madam Deputy Speaker, to all those affected by the abhorrent violence in Curran over the past week. My thoughts are with the families of those killed and injured. We hope that a peaceful resolution can be reached, and we remain in contact with relevant individuals. I was asked by my honourable friend from Hayes and Harlington about the situation in relation to the Baluch, and in particular the protests led by women in Baluchistan. I'm aware of reports of enforced disappearances. The UK strongly condemns any instances of extrajudicial killings or enforced disappearances. We urge states to fully investigate any allegations, prosecute those responsible, and provide justice to victims and their families. And we continue to encourage progress towards the criminalisation of enforced disappearances in Pakistan. Britain has a long relationship with Pakistan founded on shared history and warm ties between our people. We've heard some of that today, and like my honourable friend, I too served in Pakistan in 2010 when some of the incidents which have been referred to this afternoon have been raised, including the concerning incident with Asia Bibi. As I say, last week I had the pleasure of visiting their beautiful country, where I met ministers, businesses and religious leaders, and I can reassure the House that in all my engagements I raise some of these important issues. We know that many minorities in Pakistan face injustices, including structural discrimination, economic exclusion and wider social intolerance. I share members' concerns, Madam Deputy Speaker, about the increasing misuse of Pakistan's blasphemy laws. Too often, these laws are used to settle personal vendettas with insufficient evidence or safeguards for those accused. Once an accusation is made, there is a high risk of vigilante violence. For example, in May, an elderly Christian man died of his injuries following assault by a large mob in Punjab. These abhorrent attacks form part of a wider pattern of discrimination and violence towards marginalised religious communities.
Minister, thank you very much, Minister. One of the things when the accusations are made, and which are often vexatious, malicious, and with no evidential base whatsoever, police sometimes, on many occasions, stand by and do nothing to control the mob violence. Is that something that perhaps the Minister could take on board when in his next discussions with the Pakistan government? We want a Pakistan police force that is independent, that can have the same rule of law for everyone, and quite clearly at this moment in time it doesn't seem to have.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I raised specifically the question around how policing operates in relation to religious minorities with the Minister for Law and Human Rights, the Minister for Interior and personnel from Pakistan's security establishment just last week. I'll turn to Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan, who, as many members this afternoon have identified, continue to receive threats from extremist groups, and a number have been regrettably murdered. The practice of forced marriage and conversion is devastating the lives of women and girls from minority religious communities. We should welcome in this House small positive steps. There's been an amendment to the Christian Marriage Act to equalise the age of marriage between Christian boys and girls in Punjab, but clearly more needs to be done to protect the rights of both Muslims and religious minority girls across Pakistan. So allow me, Madam Deputy Speaker, to say a little about what the UK is doing to help. This government recognises the central importance of promoting a more open society in Pakistan. We regularly engage with their government, like-minded partners and other stakeholders to raise concerns and discuss ways of protecting marginalised communities. Generally, we assess that private engagement with Pakistan's authorities is the most effective way to get our message across. That is why I travelled recently, and that posed an excellent opportunity to convey these messages to an array of senior ministers. I met the Human Rights Minister to discuss the importance of promoting religious tolerance and harmony. I highlighted concerns about recent incidents of blasphemy-related violence and the misuse of blasphemy laws. And I raised the issues of forced marriage and conversion. He assured me that efforts were underway to pass new legislation to help address this issue. I met too with the Minister of Interior alongside the British High Commissioner. We underlined concerns about threats of violence towards the Ahmadi Muslims, and we stressed the need for police protection. Again, we received assurances that the authorities would work harder to protect minority communities. And I would like to say to the Honourable Member concerned about his own constituents in the UK that while policing is clearly a matter independent from the government, this government will do everything, as you would expect, to ensure the freedom of religious belief in the UK and ensure that religious minorities feel protected here. Since my visit, the High Commissioner has spoken to the Punjab Minister for Minority Affairs, given some of the incidents there that have been described this afternoon. She raised concerns regarding extremist threats made against minority groups, including Ahmadi Muslims, and pushed for more action on forced marriage and conversion. Of course, to maximise the impact of our engagements, we coordinate closely with the wider international community and work alongside international organisations such as the ILO in relation to the forced labour of children in brick kilns, something I saw myself even the many years ago that I served there. I will give way.
So one of the things that we asked for when we were in Pakistan was when it came to conversions and forced marriages. Many of those people whose children, young girls, have been abducted and kidnapped for the purposes of marriage don't have access to they're probably illiterate. It's not been I'm just being observational in this comment, okay? That they're sometimes illiterate. They don't understand what the paperwork is in front of them. I'd suggested, or we had suggested as a deputation back in 2023, that perhaps what they should be doing is making sure that there's a legal person available for each one of those people who find themselves in these, so that they can take forward their case from it whenever they may not know what the paperwork says. It's just a simple thing, but it would be incredibly effective.
I thank the Honourable Member for his consideration of these issues. I'd be happy to write in more detail about what we're doing in Pakistan to try and ensure that the rights of women and girls, both from the minority communities and, I'm afraid, from the whole of Pakistan, are able to prosecute their rights. The questions of illiteracy are clearly relevant, but I'm afraid there are a far wider range of issues that are making it hard for women and girls across Pakistan to be able to assert their full rights. During my trip, Madam Deputy Speaker, I was pleased to also visit Pakistan's national mosque, which is called Faisal Mosque. I met the Grand Imam there, Dr. Mohammed Ilyas, and we discussed the importance of promoting interfaith harmony and promoting tolerance. These kinds of engagements are a vital part of the UK's approach to engaging on freedom of religious belief, which must be a principle supported across all communities in Pakistan. Members posed questions about our aid programme, so allow me to comment briefly on that. Alongside our diplomatic engagement, I'm glad that the UK's targeted aid programmes are helping to protect human rights and boost inclusion. For example, our £47 million Accountability and Inclusion programme helps to change social behaviour, promote interfaith harmony by encouraging dialogue between influential community leaders. Following the Sargodha attacks in May, it prevented further violence by helping to engage with the police to identify tensions and resolve community disputes at the local level. We also raise awareness about the harms of early and forced marriages and have reached over 35 million people with our messaging to date. I note my honourable friends from Hayes and Harlington's comments about aid conditionality. We try to ensure that our aid is closely targeted. Where there are concerns, we raise them diplomatically. And I think our aid programme is an important component of our contribution to trying to address these issues in Pakistan. Members also raised the issue of modern slavery. I'd like to commend the work of representatives from both houses to raise awareness of this issue in Pakistan. I saw it with my own eyes during my own service, and I know that many members of the House have seen it too. We are supporting Pakistan's government to improve laws and strengthen related systems to protect marginalised and vulnerable groups. We've supported the Pakistani authorities to undertake the first child labour surveys in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Punjab and Balochistan. That data is being used to shape policies on child-bonded labour, including forming systems to protect them. We've also helped set up 8 child courts across Pakistan to provide justice for victims of child abuse, trafficking and child marriage. As these examples show, we're determined to ensure aid reaches those who need it most. Let me turn also to the points about the Special Envoy. I understand that this is under consideration with ministers and we should be in a position to update the House soon. And I pay tribute to the previous envoys, though, as I hope the House can see, with or without an envoy, this government will remain focused on these issues in Pakistan and elsewhere. So to conclude, this government places freedom of religion or belief at the heart of our work in Pakistan. It was a major part of my visit last week. An open and tolerant Pakistan matters, and will continue to work with their government and all key stakeholders, including this House, towards that end. Thank you.
Jim Shannon to wind up.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I thank all right honourable and honourable members for their contributions, whether it be in speeches or interventions. It's very much appreciated. Whenever we started off, we were aware of the barbaric attacks upon Christians in Jarawana province, to the relentless persecution of the Ahmadis, from the genocidal violence against the Shia Muslims in Palantator, and to the oppression of the ballot paper that the honourable member for Hayes and Harlington referred to. All those things focused attention of us all today in the chamber, and I'm very conscious that the actions we take today will speak louder than any words. We have, I believe, the power to influence change, to hold the Pakistan government accountable and to stand in solidarity with the oppressed. Let us remember that the fight for religious freedom, for justice and for peace is not optional, it is a duty. And with that in mind, I thank very much the Shadow Minister for his contribution, and in particular the Minister. I know he's a deep interest in these issues, and the discussions I've had with him on a number of occasions. We've been in a number of debates together. I've noticed his passion. So I want to thank, and finally, conclusion, thank every right honourable and honourable member who has taken the time to contribute to the debate. The commitment to human rights and to a world where all people can live without fear is commendable. And finally, I echo the sentiment that in the face of such grave injustice as we're aware of, we must never be silent. Our duty is clear and the time is to act now. I look forward to working with every member in this House to try and make it better, and in particular with the Minister, who I wish him well in the job that he does. Thank you.
The question is, as on the order paper. As many are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.